much for taking time to join us today to connect with the Ag in the Classroom through a virtual fall volunteer rally. We had originally scheduled this for in person, but got a much better response for the virtual today, and we're looking forward to sharing some updates and hopefully being able to meet each other and learn some new things and get some clarification on some things that are coming up down the pipe, such as the reports that are due at the end of the month and the essay contest. So we'll kick it off with where everyone is in Wisconsin. It looks like we've got a pretty good showing from the southeastern, southwestern, and somewhere in the middle. Hopefully that will I can share the results really quickly. But it's always fun to just kind of know and hear and see where people are joining from today. So as we get started, I'm going to just change one quick thing because it will be easier for our presenter as she joins us. But we're going to start with just kind of an overview of what we're going to do in the next, hopefully hour and a half. Actually, it's more than hour and a half to 2 hours. To lay out the groundwork of what our goals are for meetings today and what we hope to share. So first off, we want to provide an opportunity for this group to ask each other questions and share ideas. There's a lot of really great work that's happening in classrooms and in counties across the state. So we want to have an opportunity to kind of share some ideas. The second goal for today is to gain some best practices and some tips for presenting ag literacy programs. We're going to share that with our speaker. And then we're going to round out the second half by walking through the 25-year year-end reports and jumping into the 2026 essay contest program. And we have a few quick updates to share at the end as well. So I'm hoping that we can end this in under time and give everybody back a little beauty in the day today. But I definitely want to make sure that we build in plenty of time for our speaker. So we're going to start with tips, tricks, and best practices for classroom presentations. Our speaker today is joining us as a private citizen again. Halei Heinzel was the 77th Alice in Dairyland, and she worked with the past 3 Alices on a program called Expedition Agriculture with Alice in Dairyland and Wisconsin Agriculture in the Classroom. A few years ago, we were able to showcase this at our in-person fall program. It was developed through a specialty crop block grant, and the program features a full Canva presentation, which is like a PowerPoint, written script, and activities for 3rd, 4th, 5th, and if you want to push it, 6th grade students. I'm happy to report we had a really successful program the last 3 years, and that specialty crop grant has ended, which means that we get to share this resource with everyone now who is an Ag in the Classroom program. So there are 2 ways that you can use the program. The first one is a free digital Canva presentation, which Haley's going to be presenting today. And we'll talk a little bit at the end about the magnetic board option available from Wisconsin Ag in the Classroom. So without further ado, Haley, if you're ready, we can jump in a little ahead of schedule so that you can share your experiences in your 200 plus classrooms with 3,000 some students and all the stories in between. Oh, you are muted. You should have the ability to unmute yourself. I'm sorry.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. Sorry about that. Like Beth said, my name is Haley. I wrapped up serving as the 77th Alice in Dairyland in July. So I have been just being myself for the last couple months, which has been great. Here, I'll pull up the, can everyone see my screen? Can you see it, Beth? I'm going to put this into presentation mode, hoping everyone can see it. All right. Yes, I presented this to over 200 classrooms, thousands of students. The overwhelming majority of those students were fourth graders, but I've given this to students as old as high school and was very successful with that as well. I think it's a really engaging presentation, no matter what the age group. If anyone has any questions as I go through the presentation, if you want to drop them in the chat, maybe, and then Beth can let me know. We can always stop and discuss those. I'm happy to do that. But I'm just going to kind of go through how I would normally teach this presentation. Normally, I would be doing it in front of a group of students. I've never done it virtually before, so this is my first time. So I'm just going to kind of walk through it, walk through the answers, the things that I liked to share. As Alice, I had a really wide breadth of knowledge. So I have some fun facts to share that I gathered throughout my year as Alice in Dairyland. But I think the great thing about this is you can bring your own experiences to this presentation and share things that you know about all the different specialty crops and things that we grow. So let's go to the next slide here. So we start off explaining the goals of the presentation, being able to name the 5 regions of Wisconsin and top agricultural products grown in each region, describing jobs and careers needed to get food from our farms to our tables, and we're able to describe how we are all connected to agriculture every single day. Usually I stop here and I ask the students if they have learned the 5 regions of Wisconsin yet, because depending on what part of the year you're in, you might have hit them before they get to this part of their curriculum or after. So sometimes it's brand new information and sometimes it's a review, which is helpful information for going forward in the presentation. Then it starts off with a little animation of those 5 regions of Wisconsin. So I usually go through them on my hand as we look on the screen. So starting at the top with Lake Superior Lowland, then the Northern Highland area, then we've got the Central Plains, then the western uplands and the eastern ridges and lowlands. And because I traveled all over Wisconsin, here I'll go to the next one, which has all of them on there. I traveled all over Wisconsin giving this presentation. So I usually like to talk about, well, where are we on the map? Sometimes I didn't always know because I'm from the eastern ridges and lowlands area. I'm from Oconomowoc, Wisconsin. So I'm very familiar with southeastern Wisconsin. But as I traveled, sometimes I was on the edge. We talked about the things that they know grows in their area, kind of the different geography or the weather that they get in their specific area, and maybe how that compares to where I'm from. Because Oconomowoc, right outside of Waukesha, Milwaukee, is very different than somewhere like Wausau or Superior, or places like that. One of Wisconsin's biggest businesses is agriculture. A lot of students are familiar with what agriculture is, but sometimes when we get into more urban schools, they don't know. So we have them ask, what is agriculture? A lot of times they'll say plants or animals. That's a great answer. So we have the longer, fancier definition of the science of raising livestock, animals, and growing crops, plants. So encouraging students, yes, they definitely got it right. We just use some bigger sciencey words to explain it. And then we also talk about how agriculture is so many more things. I usually go and break down each of these careers. My dad is actually an arborist, so I usually talk about that with our gal in the middle with the orange safety vest on. So my own personal connection to agriculture through my parents. And then down in the middle, the communicators, that was the role that I played during while I was Alice. I did a lot of communications, and I also do that role now. So if I was giving this presentation currently, I'd talk about my own job. I do dairy nutrition marketing, so I would talk about that and how that connects to agriculture. So, why is agriculture such a big deal in Wisconsin? Our natural resources are ideal for agriculture. Our soil, our water, our climate make it a great place for Wisconsin farmers to call home. So, starting off with the land, almost half the land in Wisconsin, 13.8 million acres, is owned by farmers. So, almost half of all the area we have in Wisconsin is used for agriculture. Some kids might wonder, how big is an acre? Well, we've got that question answered. It's about the size of a football field. So that's almost half of Wisconsin is all agriculture, which is they find very fascinating. Then our water. We're very blessed to be surrounded by water on three sides: Lake Michigan, Mississippi River, and Lake Superior. And of course, a lot of students know there's water all over Wisconsin: lakes, rivers, ponds, streams. You can really find water wherever you're going in Wisconsin. But not only is there a lot of water all around us in Wisconsin, there's also a lot of water laying beneath our feet. In fact, about 1.2 million billion gallons of water. This is a popular slide to stop for questions. A lot of students want to know how many zeros this is. So 1.2 million billion is a really fun way to say 1.2 quadrillion. Sometimes students will ask about that too if they're very math minded. 1.2 quadrillion is 1 comma 2 plus 14 zeros after it, which helps them visualize how many gallons of water this is. This is so many gallons of water that if we took all the water below the state and put it on top of the state of Wisconsin, we better have done our swimming lessons, because it's enough to submerge our entire state in 100 feet of water. While I was Alice, I also learned that the Grand Canyon, the volume of the Grand Canyon, is 1.2 million billion gallons of water. So if you took all the water from below the state of Wisconsin and put it into the Grand Canyon, it would be filled right to the brim. The Grand Canyon is a great segue into the next slide, too, because we're talking about erosion. So, the Grand Canyon is a very famous example of erosion. Sometimes I'll have students raise their hand and ask, or I'll ask them if they know any other examples of erosion, talking about how water wears away rock and soil, and how Wisconsin, we've been caring for our land and water for a very long time. In fact, since the 1930s, we've been pioneering ways to help protect our soil and water from erosion, like using plants that hold the roots in to keep our soil from washing away. Then our climate. I like to talk about how Wisconsin's climate is very unique in that we have four seasons. So, thinking about areas of the US that maybe don't receive four seasons, particularly some hotter and drier areas in the US, because what we're actually looking for on this slide here is the importance of the winter season in Wisconsin. So, lots of people, even if they're not farmers, know that spring is a great time for planting your tulip bulbs. Summer is when all of those plants are growing and green, and fall, of course, is harvest time. Whether they're growing crops in their own backyards, or they're heading out to a local agritourism destination and they're seeing pumpkins getting pulled out of the ground. So they do know that growing cycle, but students don't always recognize how important winter is for some of our plants, especially things like apple trees, where they really need that off season to take a rest, take a break. I usually compare it to their seasons where they are taking a break during the summer. A lot of them can't imagine not having summer vacation. And if you had to work every single day, do a class packet every single day with no break, no summer break. So that is really similar to our plants. They need to take some time off, rest, and then they can come back bigger and stronger in the spring, just like our students do in the fall when they're getting back from their summer vacations. We also talk about how our farmers protect the climate. They're very climate smart. So I've got some technology up here on the slide. We've got the drones, and we've also got some irrigation, talking about how farmers only want to use exactly what they need, exactly where they need it, at exactly the right amount. Farmers don't like to be wasteful, especially with important resources like water, which we talked about earlier. Also, the honeybees and pollinator plots are really important. I have a friend who she has a whole diverse agricultural operation. I usually like to bring her up because they grow a lot of vegetables, they have animals, and they also became beekeepers in order to have their bees right there next to their vegetables. So some farmers have their pollinator plots, which just attract bees. Other farmers become beekeepers themselves. And we talk about the relationship farmers have with taking care of the bees throughout that winter time. And then, of course, we get the honey at the end, which is great too. And we talked about, usually I totally forgot. I haven't given this presentation in like 4 months. Normally on the water slide, I talk about how many cows we have in Wisconsin, because cows drink a bathtub full of water every single day. There's 1.2 million cows calling Wisconsin home. But we also grow a lot of different things in Wisconsin. We talked about the apple trees we have growing here, or the pumpkins we harvest in the fall. That's because Wisconsin has diverse agriculture, a variety of animals and crops raised and grown based on geography and natural resources. This is what the whole game is about for the second half of the presentation. Then we go over a couple examples: fruits, vegetables, horticulture, and nursery crops. I make sure students understand what horticulture means, the growing of baby trees, things like that. Um, Commodity crops, corn, soybeans, wheat, and oats. Our livestock, goats, equines, poultry, swine, and of course, all our cattle, beef, and dairy. Agriculture helps support Wisconsin's communities, families, and economy. I stop here and ask students what the economy is all about if they've heard about this in their social studies classes. Usually just looking for one word. Some people say makes the world go round. And that, of course, is money. Goods and services made and used by a business, community, or country. The great thing about this definition, a lot of students will often gravitate towards other parts of the definition, businesses, community. And so you can still emphasize that they were definitely on the right track. 1 in 10 Wisconsin jobs. Oh, I totally forgot about this part too. Normally I ask, well, how do we make money? A lot of students say jobs. Well, 1 in 10 jobs in Wisconsin are in agriculture. It's over 353,900 jobs. And then a lot of students, oh, well, I don't want to be a farmer. That's okay. There's over 300 different careers in agriculture. Can we think of 5 of them that are not directly on the farm? The pictures on the screen definitely help, and it's a fun challenge to try and connect basically anything they say back to agriculture. Even if they say something like a doctor or a police officer, we can think of ways that those careers could be pivoted towards agriculture. A doctor could be a veterinarian, a doctor for animals. A police officer could be a DNR game warden working with our natural resources. So there are definitely some jobs that just simply do not connect, but even things like art and graphic design can be used in a marketing career for agriculture. So that's always a fun challenge too. 84% of Wisconsin's agricultural jobs are in agricultural processing. So a lot of students don't know what this means. So we have to explain. I usually, because there's milk on the screen, tell the story of how milk gets from the dairy farm into our homes. So we start with the cow. Farmer milks the cow, cools the milk down, gets picked up by our milkman, goes to a milk processing plant. It's filtered, it's pasteurized. This is where the magic of chocolate milk happens. Doesn't come from brown cows, it comes from agricultural processing. Gets bottled, labeled, put on a truck, and sent to our grocery stores, our coffee shops, our gas stations, our quick trips, all that wonderful things. Wisconsin agriculture contributes $116.3 billion to our state's economy each year. Depending on how fast I'm moving through the presentation, sometimes I like to break this number down because this is really hard for little brains to grasp exactly how much money this is. So if we break it down, the dairy industry is about half, a little less than half, $52.8 billion. And a fun fact about our dairy industry, if you took all the money that Florida makes from oranges and all the money that Idaho makes from potatoes, and a lot of students do know. You can ask, oh, what is Florida known for? Oh, oranges or lemons, they know. What is Idaho known for? They always know it's potatoes. So if you take all the money Idaho makes from selling potatoes and all the money Florida makes from selling oranges and put it together in the same piggy bank, you'd still want to take home the piggy bank from Wisconsin because our dairy industry makes more than both states combined. And that's only half of the money that we make from all of our agricultural products in Wisconsin. And that's one of my favorite fun facts to share because you can see like the lights turn on. They are like so shocked by that number because agriculture is a big deal in Wisconsin. We also send agricultural products all over the world. Our top exports are to Canada, Mexico, China, Korea, and Japan. But you can really find Wisconsin agriculture wherever you go. If you have done any international traveling and you have stories to share, they're usually very interested in that. I went to Vietnam in January as Alice. And while I was there for Wisconsin ginseng, I actually saw Belgioso, Wisconsin cheese in the grocery store, which was very cool to share. And then before we get into the game, the last question is, how are we all impacted by agriculture? Usually stop here and ask, does anyone think if farms went away, their life would not even change a little bit? And you'll get different reactions from this. Sometimes you'll have no one raise their hand because a lot of them grow up on farms. And so if a farm went away, their whole life would be different. But other students in our more urban areas might not see the daily impact of farms in their lives. And so it is a little bit of a trick question, but it's not to get them to feel silly about themselves. It's just to get them to think about, even if we don't see farm animals every day, it doesn't matter if you were born on an 8th generation dairy farm or you're in New York City living in a high rise and you'll never see a cow a day in your life. Agriculture touches everyone in 3 different ways every single day. I can always get them on the first one. I always ask, did you have breakfast today or did you have lunch today, depending on the time of the day? Always yes. And everything we eat starts in agriculture. This is also a good one to kind of pause. And sometimes kids will throw out different foods that they don't think would start in agriculture, especially some of our more processed foods. But like, think about it, a Cheez It is covered in cheese. Where does that cheese start? On a dairy farm. You can usually help them work backwards and make that connection. A lot of questions I get usually revolve around our fishing industry. They don't always think of fishing as agriculture. And of course, wild caught fishing is, but Wisconsin's also home to a lot of fish farms. And so we can talk about how fish are raised in Wisconsin on farms. The second way is our fiber products. So thankfully, everyone's wearing enough clothes. I have a wool sweater on today, but if they have books in their classroom, wooden furniture, timber framed homes, any of that is a fiber product from agriculture. And then the last one, they are often not thinking of until they turn 16, but our fuel products. Any vehicle, like I think it's 2004, maybe even older or newer, can use it's E85, I believe, which is 10% ethanol. Ethanol, ask them, what is ethanol made of? Some students know, sometimes it's a guess. They find it very shocking sometimes that it's made out of corn. Doesn't mean that we're driving up to Quick Trip and shoving corn cobs in our gas tank. Again, agricultural processing helps turn corn into fuel we can use in our cars. So then we're going to head into the game. I use this slide normally talk about the rules depending on the class size. If it's really small, it's a little more informal, but especially when I do this in front of our larger groups, I've done groups of students as large as probably 100. We have to limit the amount of guesses because it can't go through all 100 guesses. And I say, well, we're going to do some of these you're going to know right away. Some of these we're going to actually learn together. And that is great. We're going to take 3 guesses. If we get them wrong, that is okay. We're going to keep moving on, and we're gonna take some time to learn together about it. Then here's the whole map so they understand why we have to keep moving. I try to get this presentation, and by the end of having done it so many times, I can do this presentation in about 40 minutes and leave 15 to 20 minutes for questions. So you really got to keep it moving if you want to stay on that time scale. So our first one, Wisconsin ranks 4th in the nation for producing this sticky specialty crop. The sweet treat's processed in a bush, but is tapped from our state tree. Of course, this is maple syrup. Talk about how it comes out of the tree, clear, watery liquid. It looks nothing like maple syrup, but hiding in that maple syrup is some maple sap, excuse me, is a little itty bitty bit of maple sugar. And then there's the boiling process, which boils off a majority of the water, leaving us behind with just that maple sugar, which begins to caramelize, turn brown, get much sweeter. And we have to boil off so much water. It takes 40 gallons, sometimes up to 50 gallons of maple sap to make just 1 gallon of maple syrup. And of course, our state tree from that first slide is the sugar maple, which, fun fact, was voted on by our state's 4th graders. So that's always a fun one to share too. Okay, grown for nearly 2,400 years, this is one of the oldest cultivated crops in Wisconsin. Today, Wisconsin produces over 48% of the nation's supply of this vegetable. This is snap beans, green beans, French beans, string beans, no matter what you call them, Wisconsin's really good at growing them. In fact, we are #1 in the United States for producing green beans. I have our students, I point out that we have that sticker in the corner of the screen so that they can see. That means Wisconsin's #1. We're going to see that 4 more times in the presentation. Want to make sure to remember those because there's going to be a pop quiz at the end where we're going to talk about it. Over 62% of this fruit in the entire United States is grown in Wisconsin. It's Wisconsin's official state fruit. This is, of course, our cranberries. Sometimes on this slide, I like to say true or false. Cranberries are grown in water. A lot of students are going to say true. Then we can talk about cranberry production and how that's something that a lot of people don't know, but now you get to go home and share that with your parents. The interesting thing, Wisconsin, not only are we #1 in the US, we're actually #1 in the whole world for cranberry production. Over half of the cranberries in the entire world are grown in Wisconsin. In fact, Wood County is our #1 county for producing cranberries. 1 in 9 cranberries in the entire world are produced in Wood County. The official Wisconsin state herb that is native to Wisconsin's deciduous forests. Wisconsin produces 90% of the specialty crop in the United States. I never have students get this one correct unless they are from Marathon County. And even then, it's still pretty uncommon. But we still take a lot of good guesses. This is our ginseng. This is the one slide that has sound. But Talk about what ginseng is used for, how we export most of it to Asian countries, especially China, and how people in China have a really special cultural relationship with ginseng. If you give somebody a gift of, I'm going to go back to the slide just so there's no noise. If you give somebody a gift of ginseng, especially during the Lunar New Year, it means that you really, really care about that person. Because ginseng is very expensive. We produce some of the highest quality ginseng in the entire world, but also because it is wishing somebody a year of good health. They feel that it has a lot of health benefits. Oh, and ginseng, if you haven't been around it, it can be used for tea, baked goods, soups. You can eat it all on its own. It tastes like a really, really strong carrot. Some people say it has kind of a dirt-ish flavor, which is just very earthy, kind of bitter, but that's ginseng. Wisconsin ranks second in the nation for producing this root crop. This crop can be purple and yellow, but is best known as an orange veggie. Now, a slide like this, most of the students are going to raise their hand immediately. So usually say, okay, we're going to do this one all together using your inside voices. 3, 2, 1. And they say carrots. There we go. So here's some carrots getting harvested. This is very clearly not your grandma's vegetable garden. So our farmers are harvesting hundreds, if not thousands, of acres of carrots each year. So they can't pull them all out by hand. And this is also where we can talk back about agricultural processing. I say, would any of you like to put that directly on your dinner plate? And all of them go, no, it's so gross because there's dirt all over it. So we talk about how the carrots go, they get measured to make sure they're not too long and not too short, not too skinny, not too fat. So they all fit in the package correctly. That's really important in the grocery store. But those carrots that don't always measure up as the right size, it doesn't mean that we throw them away. We use agricultural processing again. We chop them into size, we throw them in a tumbler to round off the edges. This is, of course, where our baby carrots come from. So they are full grown carrots that have been cut and peeled through the magic of agricultural processing. Wisconsin ranks third in the nation for producing this vegetable crop. This legume can be enjoyed in the pod or shelled. And this is going to be our peas. I don't have a great pea fact, so this would be a really good one to add. Usually on this slide, I share that I think as I've traveled through Wisconsin, if we were not America's Dairyland, we would be America's Veggie Land because we do produce a lot of vegetables in Wisconsin. Lend me your ears. Wisconsin ranks third in the nation for producing this versatile vegetable. It's the tallest specialty crop of the Three Sisters. Sometimes teachers want to stop here and talk about what the other two Three Sisters agriculture, so the squash and the beans as well. This is, of course, corn. So talk about corn is for us to eat, our sweet corn, but we also grow corn for our animals, green corn, and we grow corn for ethanol production. Wisconsin's ninth in the nation for producing corn for ethanol. Also, if you have a really antsy class, this is can be a great time if you read the room correctly to take a brain break. We start off small on the floor. Everyone stands up and kind of huddles over on the floor, and then we stand up and stretch out our corn stalks and our corn leaves. And it's a great way for them to just stretch and then sit back down because we're about halfway through the presentation. So sometimes we get a little antsy at this point. This starchy spud thrives in our state soil, Anago silt loam. Wisconsin grows these plants for eating and for seed. This is our potatoes. So here's our potatoes getting harvested from below the ground. I love to talk about if you are a tech savvy, a video game savvy person. A lot of students get confused about the for seed portion of potatoes. So I love to talk about Minecraft. If you're familiar with that, students absolutely love that. So a lot of them do play it. I ask, well, how do you grow a potato in Minecraft? Well, they stick a potato in the ground and it grows a new potato plant. There's no potato seed, which is exactly like real life. Our farmers, some of them grow potato plants for seed, meaning that they're only growing them to cut them into quarters and mail them to other farmers to stick in the ground and grow new potato plants. So it's almost just like real life, except one potato can make like 4 or more potato plants, whereas in Minecraft, it's one for one. My other fun fact is that potatoes were the first vegetables grown in space. And the really cool fact about this is that those potatoes actually came from UW-Madison. A lot of people know the UW for their dairy research, their agricultural research, but they have a really great potato research program, and they sent potatoes to space. Oh, also, it's important to point out on this slide, a lot of students are very shocked by this. This means that the potatoes were grown in zero gravity, not zero oxygen. So just a big building up in space, because this can be really confusing. It seems like the potatoes are just floating, but no, they're still potted, still just inside. 1.28 million of this state domesticated animal live in America's Dairyland, the official state beverage of Wisconsin's produced by these beautiful bovines. So this is a tricky one because a lot of them think it's milk, but it is dairy cows. So it's a little bit of a trick wording. And I always point out on this slide, well, we are America's Dairyland, but where is the number one Wisconsin sticker? And they're all aghast. Well, does anyone know who is number one for dairy cows and fluid milk production in the United States? And somebody always knows it's California. They produce 80% of the fluid milk we consume across the US. Thankfully, in Wisconsin, we have a lot of bottling plants, so we don't have to be subjected to California milk, especially if you drink your milk from Quick Trip. It all comes from farms within 50 miles of Quick Trip headquarters in La Crosse. So just because we are not number one for fluid milk or number one even for the number of dairy cows, in Wisconsin, we focus on the quality of our dairy products, not always the quantity. And there is a place where we definitely succeed in both. And that is, of course, 90% of our milk is being made or processed into the official state food of Wisconsin. We make more of this dairy delight than any other state. It's going to be our cheese products. I talk a little bit about the cheese making process, the separation of the curds and the whey. It's important to point out here that the whey is a byproduct or leftover from the cheese making process that we're going to set aside and use for something later. Then we're going to take those cheese curds, drain all that whey off, put them into a mold, whether that's like a square, a block mold like this, or like a wheel. And that cheese could be ready to rock and roll within 2 or 3 days and hit grocery shelves, or could it have to age for 15 years or more? Meaning that there are cheeses sitting in cheese caves that are older than the students that you'll be teaching, which is very mind blowing for them. Sometimes we'll talk about different varieties of cheese that they like, or cheeses that were invented here in Wisconsin. We produce over 600 styles, types, and varieties of internationally recognized and awarded cheeses. We win more awards for our cheese than any other state in the US and any other country in the world if Wisconsin was its own country. In fact, the number one most awarded cheese in the world is from the Driftless region of Wisconsin. Fun fact, saying the word cheese actually makes you smile. Don't blow through this one because students will all say cheese at once to prove to you that they can say cheese without smiling. It happens every single time. Wisconsin makes almost 30% of the nation's supply of this protein packed powder. This byproduct or leftover from making cheese is dried and added to baked goods, beverages, and protein nutrition supplements. The reason I specifically point out the way and use the wording that I do is because students really won't get this slide unless you're very direct about the way you say it. And even then, they still really have to be paying attention. This is, of course, our dry whey. Wisconsin is number one in the United States for dry whey for human consumption because of our cheese making. So every time we make cheese, we're making whey. And instead of dumping it down the drain and wasting it, our cheese makers and our other dairy people realized we could dry it out and turn it into something else we can use. I also like to talk about how some of our cheese makers are really great friends with our dairy farmers, or they have a dairy farm right there at the creamery, and that whey can sometimes go right back to our dairy cows. So it's something that we get to share with our cows. Now we're back in the specialty crop realm. Wisconsin ranks fourth in the nation for growing this tart fruit. This fruit grows in orchards and does not ripen once picked. This is, of course, our tart cherries. 100% of Wisconsin's commercial cherry crop is grown in Door County, so one county in Wisconsin. We can also talk about how Door has a really unique climate that allows them to be really good at growing fruit, not just cherries, but also apples and grapes. And that goes into the whole regions of Wisconsin things. So they're a little bit more of a longer growing season than the rest of the state because of the lake effect. Wisconsin's home to 4,000 acres of orchards that grow this fruit. 25% of this fruit's volume is from air, which is why they float. This is our apples. There we go. We grow over 300 different varieties of apples in Wisconsin, all of which ripen at different times. So you can start picking as early as late August, early September, and basically up until that first freeze. But you want to make sure you're picking at the right time because if you really like apples to eat, they're not always eating apples that are ripe. Sometimes it's pie apples or applesauce apples. Apples will ripen 6 to 10 times faster at room temperature, so it's important to keep them cool. These bountiful berries are native to many parts of the world, including Wisconsin. This type of fruit is the only one with seeds on the outside. This is our strawberries. There's on average 200 seeds on the outside of every single strawberry. Wisconsin's home to over 27,000 farms and ranches that raise these ruminant animals. This Wisconsin food is a good source of 10 essential nutrients, including protein and zinc. I usually try and have them take a guess, and then I say, "Oh, do we know what the word ruminant means?" Usually, ruminant is too big of a word for fourth graders, and so I say, "Well, we're looking for an animal. We're looking for an animal that has four legs, chews its cud, and has hooves." And that helps them narrow it down. A lot of the guesses are going to be pigs, deer. I sometimes get chickens, which is why it's important to point out that animals have four legs. And horses is the other one, which I get occasionally. It's important to point out that we do not eat horses in Wisconsin or in the US. But of course, this is our beef cows. Wisconsin ranks fifth in the nation for growing these specialty plants. Wisconsin harvests over 700,000 of these plants to be enjoyed fresh each year. This is our Christmas trees. Whether they taste fir, spruce, pine, I'll take all of those. My fun fact is that helicopters help to lift harvested Christmas trees from farms, especially when those farms are very remote and it can be hard to get a truck and trailer out to go pick the Christmas trees up. Wisconsin ranks number one in the nation in production of this different kind of dairy. No kidding. 70% of the world relies on the milk or meat from this type of animal. This is our dairy goats. If I have enough time, I'll usually talk about how, particularly in the US, the dairy goat versus the meat goat are very different. But in places where they're more commonly consumed, like the Middle East and Africa, they're often a dual purpose animal that can do both things. But here in Wisconsin, we don't do a ton with meat goats, but we are very big in dairy goats. In fact, the dairy goat capital of the United States is in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. And I do get a lot of chuckles on this slide. A lot of kids think that seeing a goat be milked is very funny. And so I always like to go back and talk about our dairy cows and how this is literally an identical process. The biggest difference is that a goat only has two teats and a cow has four. But everything else is pretty much the same. The other thing is the volume. Goats are producing significantly less milk than cows are. 9.8 million of these animals are raised in Wisconsin. These animals can produce two different types of protein. I'll usually stop because everyone's hands shoot up. And I say, I know you're all very smart and know that this is chicken. Can you tell me what the two kinds of protein are? And of course, that is meat and eggs. Wisconsin ranks 13th in the nation for growing this special type of squash. This versatile vegetable can be used for its fleshy center, seeds, and used for decorations. This is pumpkin. We might be 12th in the nation for pumpkin production, but we're actually 5th in the nation for growing giant pumpkins. The record in Wisconsin was set near Eau Claire in Altoona last year for a pumpkin that was 2,500 pounds, just over 2,500, which is more than two full grown dairy cows. So it's a pretty cool thing. And then it looks like we're updating the presentation. So I don't have anything for floriculture or horticulture, but I'm excited to see what that turns into. Here is our complete map with all of our specialty crops. Then we're going to do our pop quiz. Share a crop or food Wisconsin's the top producer in. Have them list them. And then they come up on the screen here. Ginseng, dry whey, cranberries, dairy goats, dairy cheese, or goat cheese, all that. Snap beans, and of course, our cow cheese. They list the 5 regions of Wisconsin and agricultural product from each region. You're really going to have to play it by ear on how advanced your group is. If it's a smaller group, sometimes it's an easier one to do. If it's a group later in the year after they've already learned the regions of Wisconsin, they're going to be better at this. But sometimes it's just easiest to click past this and talk through it together. So here is those 5 regions again. And here is the overlay. And I also like to stop and talk about the fact that just because on this presentation, we have something listed in a certain region, like the apples up in Lake Superior Lowland. Well, I did not travel to the Lake Superior Lowland area while I was Alice. So every classroom I was in, I said, did you guys have to drive like 5 hours to go pick apples last fall? And all of them say, no, we did not. And that's because apples grow all over the state of Wisconsin. And so some of these I like to point out, which are specifically regional: the cherries, the ginseng, which is grown primarily in Marathon County. And that's those, and then maple syrup too. The commercial maple syrup is really only grown in the northern half of Wisconsin. But yes, other things you can find all over the place. And how are you connected to Wisconsin agriculture? So, reviewing those three F's, food, fiber, fuel. And some of us have the bonus fourth F of farm, where we're seeing it firsthand every single day. And that is the entire presentation. So, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here real quick. And we can open it up for some questions. I know I shared a lot of things very quickly. Let's see, stop share. There we go. So, does anyone have any questions for me on whether it's facts or how to present, tips, anything like that?
You can also drop your questions in the chat if you are unable to um to speak due to circumstances. But with this, I think Haley, you clearly know the content. How did you really work on getting to know the presentation and getting it down to kind of that speed and cadence that really works for you?
It is one of those things that simply takes time. Like I did it over 200 times. Several of that was multiple times in the same day. So I was very lucky to be able to have that amount of practice with just one presentation. But it is something where it's like I even was reviewing before this because I haven't given it in a while. I looked up to make sure some of my facts were still accurate because things have changed since July. And I know like the cranberry stats are very rapidly changing right now. So that's one to really keep an eye on. But yeah, looking up, figuring out your own facts, things that you find interesting, if you can figure out a way to explain them that a fourth grader would understand, they're often going to find the same things very interesting, if not more interesting, because it's probably going to be like the first time they've ever heard that or thought about it in their entire life. And so they think it's really, really cool. And I got through being Alice, I received a lot of thank you letters or follow up letters afterwards. And it was really great to see the things that did stick out. So cranberries is one that students really remember a lot about. The fun facts, whether it was that they don't actually grow in water, they're harvested in water. Cheese is another one that really sticks out for them. And then yes, the follow up question about I'm serious that 1.2 million billion, like know for sure that 14 zeros comes after that because that is probably one of the number one questions I received. The beauty of fourth graders is that, oh, thank you so much, Lindsay. I appreciate it. You may think you know a lot, and fourth graders are really good at pointing out the things that you don't know. And so the great thing is that you can take that question and then make sure you're ready for the next time. That honestly is like that was the easiest way for me to prep. I was like, okay, what do they ask me that I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'll have to get back to you on that. And then make sure you have it on hand for next time. That was another thing that Beth and I had talked about too. It's okay to not know everything. It was really scary as Alice because I think people expect Alice to know like all the things, and Alice does know a lot of them. But even somebody like Alice, even teachers don't always know the answers, and it's perfectly acceptable to say, I'm so sorry, I don't know everything about that particular topic, but I'm happy to send you a follow up email or I'm happy to send you a letter. I had a class that had sent a long list of questions to me, and I wrote them a letter that answered all their questions. I was able to include some pictures from my own personal experience, which was great, and mailed that back to them. So I'm sure that they also thought that was really cool. But yes, it's totally okay. Another question, some questions I should get a lot. If you share the pumpkin stat about Wisconsin being fifth for growing giant pumpkins, they're going to want to know a lot about any other very large vegetable. I don't know anything about any other very large vegetable. And so the second you get a question about that, I make that very clear. I only know the pumpkin stat. And I also did see Wisconsin's largest cranberry once. It was like this big. They're not very huge. So that's always a thing to point out. And two, they'll ask sometimes questions about other states' agriculture. As Alice, I knew only Wisconsin, and I was pretty upfront about that too. Like I know a couple things about some of the other surrounding Midwest states, but most questions need to stay based in Wisconsin. Otherwise, I'm not going to know the answer.
Okay. So I've got one more question for you. In presenting to classrooms, Was there a difference based on where you were in the state? Because we have a lot of folks joining from different areas who will potentially have the opportunity to see different groups. What
Mhm.
advice do you have for kind of how did you read the group and what adjustments did you make on the fly?
Yes. The biggest thing, fourth grade they seem very young, but they are very smart still. They do know a lot. You don't have to totally dumb it down unless they're making it clear that they don't understand, and then you can kind of break it down further. And that it goes the same for our rural students versus our urban students. Urban students might not know as much right away, and so you have to kind of explain things more or explain more in depth, but they're also going to have a lot more fun follow-up questions. I loved urban classrooms. I grew up in urban Wisconsin, and so that was a big passion for me as Alice. So just because they might be a little slower or they might not get them all right away doesn't mean that they don't understand it when you're explaining it. But I also loved talking with those urban students who it's eye opening to hear from somebody who actually works in agriculture. I, growing up, would have very much benefited from seeing a program like this in my own school. This wasn't something I had the benefit of having. Because they've never seen a farmer before. I didn't meet like a real for real farmer outside of agritourism until I was in high school and joined FFA my junior year. And so this is like this is the one time to really make an impact, and show them where their food comes from before the grocery store. Because I remember what it was like before I really understood that milk came from cows and people had to take care of those cows every day. So yes, it is different urban versus rural, and usually just based on kind of where you are. It's easy to tell. If you're in that southeastern region of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Sheboygan, Racine, Kenosha, Waukesha, you're gonna have to probably answer a lot more questions and even like very basic questions. When you get into the rural areas, students are gonna know a lot already. They're gonna like ace the guessing game, and they're also probably not going to have as many follow-up questions. So I had a string where I was in like Prentice, Gilman, like anything Marathon, Wausau area. They knew a lot more, just because they're growing up on farms or their grandparents' farms or things like that.
Okay. Are there any other questions? I feel like that was a lot of information. And you're probably all wondering where you can get the resources. So before you totally sign off, I'm gonna share some of the resources that she referenced. So I've had the opportunity to work with the last few Allison Dairylands to kind of get ready for this presentation. So we actually developed a couple of resources that are out there. So the supporting resources for this one, the presentation that Haley just shared, you'll have access to it at the end of this meeting. You'll get all of the slides from that we're referencing today, and the link to the presentation is in the slides. And what's nice about that is if you choose to go to a classroom or you want to take a stab at presenting this, all you have to do is send the link to the presentation to the teacher, and they will get it in their inbox. They can open it for you on either their smart board or if it's a projector screen, and click present, and it's all there. It's really nice because you don't have to plug in a thumb drive or try to send files, or log in or bring your own computer. This is really plug and play, and teachers appreciate it when you send the information in advance because one, they can go back and reference it with their students when you're done. But two, they don't have to mess with their school's IT department to let you use their equipment. They can stay logged in, and um, they're just providing the spot for you to present. So it's actually pretty slick. And what we did with Haley and the kind of the past Alice's is there is presenters notes built into the Canva presentation. So I wanted to share what that looks like. I just downloaded all of the notes in a PDF. It is 104 pages if you really want to see that, but it does exist so that you can take a look at what the slides and what the script looks like. So I just want to share what that looks like right now. And you will also have a link to that as well. So what you're seeing, this is what the PDF looks like. So you'll get a view of each slide and then suggested script below it. So it is hopefully pretty plug and play. And you'll notice that Hailei added a lot of her own stories to it, which is fantastic. And that's just something that I know came through practice. Hailei did this a lot, and I got to be with her the first time she gave the presentation. And I watched her give it 3 times, and by the end of the day, she pretty much had it down. So it does flow really well. It does take a little bit of practice, but it's something that you can learn pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Are there any questions? I feel like that was a lot of information. So if you are interested in this, just by show of hands, virtually or you can come on camera. If you're interested in doing this, just raise your hand. I'm really curious who wants this. I know it was really popular a couple years ago and we weren't sure how we were going to do it with Alice, but now that we don't have the grant, we're just working with the Alice program. Just there, she's only going to be going to about 20 schools total this year. So we've got a lot of opportunity to get this in front of students. So, oh, awesome, Lindsay. Rob, you're on, man.
I'm on. I just want to thank Haley for being in Medford, Wisconsin this year. And she did a great job with the fourth graders and also with the ag careers with the high school students.
Thank you.
And I was going to ask you, you just said Alice is only doing a few of these this year. Ashley, not Ashley, her sister, Sarah.
Yes, she is, because we had a specialty crop block grant that allowed for some more of her time and travel to be paid for. And that ended as of September 30th. So we are looking for more creative ways how we can continue Alice getting into schools. And we're really hoping that we can continue sharing the presentation through all of our Ag in the Classroom volunteers. We think it's a great program. Hailei clearly did an awesome job sharing what it can look like. And I'm really excited to just to share it with you. There are a couple schools particularly near media centers. So like Wausau, I know, has a couple of Alice presentations lined up because the host of the finals this year is Marathon County. I know there are a few Milwaukee, a couple of La Crosse, and just a few sprinklings of schools in between. But if you're thinking about taking this out, just email me and I will double check that we don't accidentally book the same presentation twice. That's something that we are trying to avoid, but because the Alice program is going to just so few schools this year, I feel really confident that we won't have that challenge.
Yeah. Rob, too, I'm sure that Alice probably will go to the Medford area. I think that's become kind of a staple in the spring for her as well. But if you guys haven't reached out yet, you can email datcapalice@wisconsin.gov and make sure that that happens. I'm sure that they would be happy to have Sarah go and spend the day with you guys again.
Well, I've already talked with Sarah, and she is going to go into the ag department.
Perfect.
She's talked to the ag teachers already, so
Awesome.
I know she's going to be in town. I just don't know when, but they're working it out.
Yeah. The other thing I forgot to say earlier when I was talking about the urban versus the rural schools, this can be anywhere, can happen anywhere. Fourth graders will also ask not only questions you don't know the answer to, but questions you do know the answer to, but maybe don't want to talk about. So my advice always, first and foremost, I didn't learn this in a classroom. I actually learned this on a different tour with Alice, is never bring up something that you don't want to answer questions about. So I was on a tour of a dairy farm with a bunch of urban people who had never been on a dairy before. And I was not leading the tour. It was a farmer leading the tour. And we're going through the calf barns. Everyone was just enjoying the calves, having a good time, looking at the calves. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the dairy farmer brings up veal calves and starts talking about veal calves and veal crates. No one was thinking about veal calves or veal crates until he brought it up. So like if you don't want to talk about something until someone asks a question, just don't mention it. Just don't say it. That's totally fine. But the other thing I always want to say too is that if somebody does ask a hard question, don't always shy away from the answer. Just because it's not the pretty side of agriculture, it's important to talk about how farms are very real. I got a couple different schools, not a very common question, but definitely more than once. Kids asking things along the lines of like, do animals have to die in order to eat them? Do farmers get sad when their beef cows go to the butcher? And it's important to talk about how farmers are respectful of beef cows and the life cycle of beef cows, and how beef is an important part of our agriculture industry, things like that. So it's important to be honest and still talk about those hard things. And you'd be surprised. A lot of kids are very rational about it. I get questions about what happens when a dairy cow retires. And the answer is she ends up as ground beef 9 times out of 10. In fact, 75% of our ground beef comes from our dairy cows. And like it's like, oh my gosh, like why can't we just keep them all as pets? Well, we've got 1.2 million of them. Can you imagine burying 1 million cows? And they're like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And they move on. So kids are actually very, very logical. So I always caution against like trying to brush things under the rug too, even if it's not always like a super comfortable question.
Yes, that's good advice. And one other thing that I've kind of seen and maybe I don't always check myself. And Haley, you did such a fabulous job of not using acronyms. It's really, I mean, working as Alice, you work for DATCAP, and there's a lot of other things that you can bring into it. But really checking your language and making sure that you're not using acronyms and you're not using, um, going too deep into the weeds. And one of my favorite examples of that is I was in a classroom in Anago. Roseanne, I hope this doesn't happen to you. I was in a second grade classroom and someone asked the question about where are all the boy cows? Where are the dads? And I was getting ready to answer, and a little boy who was a dairy farm kid went into AI and the tank and the seaman, and it really escalated very quickly. And I think most second graders kind of missed it, but don't underestimate, like Haley said, don't underestimate the knowledge that your kids bring to this, but definitely be ready to kind of set those boundaries of like how you're gonna cap that question. And it does come up. So
That's the only one where I've ever I will explain it to a certain degree. And then usually I'm like, if you have any further questions about this, please talk to your mom and dad. Like you can take it all the way up to a certain point. So like I've usually gotten far enough where I'm like, there's a special guy, his whole job is to come to the farm and help our cows get pregnant. That's about as far as I'll go. And then after that, it's a mom and dad discussion. But yeah, they are very. I've had conversations with some kids where it's like trying to explain the difference between a beef cow and a dairy cow, and I've had other classrooms where I've drawn like a diagram on the board of the 4 stomachs of the cow. So it really sometimes you get a kid that asks just the right question. If you can explain it at just the right level, they are very good at understanding.
all right. Any final questions for Haley? I know she's technically using her lunch break to join us today, so really appreciate that and want to say thank you for going to all those classrooms and making all those connections with students. Many students outside of 4th grade, they don't really, because if they don't have an agriculture program or we don't have an ambassador in their area or an ag in the classroom program, they don't see or hear from a farmer or about agriculture from the perspective of someone in agriculture. So really want to thank Haley for all the work she did as Alice and for really being a champion of this program and ensuring that we have so many teachers who are asking for Alice to come back, and we want to really grow this program. So I have a couple of things to share with you and send you, but I wanted to make sure that you're going to get your very own Whoops. Oh, my camera's put it on me. Maybe it'll work. Your very own ag literacy
Oh, thank
shirt.
you.
So we'll make sure that you continue even without this tiara and the sash.
Yeah.
The world knows that you know what you're talking about. So really appreciate it. Any final questions? Otherwise, we're going to send Haley back to work. All right. Thank you so much, Haley. Appreciate
Thank
you
you,
joining us today.
guys.
I want to welcome everyone and thank you so much.